Okay, good evening. This is Huntley Community School District 158, May 2nd special meeting. Call to order. Can we have roll call, please?
Mr. Gentry.
Here.
Mr. Karen.
Here.
Mr. Troy.
Here.
Mr. Quagliano.
Here.
Mr. Daly.
Here.
Mrs. Maiorino. Here. Mr. Craddy.
Here. Okay. We can all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have item 3 is public comment. Do I have any public comments? Nothing? Okay. All right, on to item 4. Our action item for the evening is minutes. We have our last minutes from our last couple meetings. I'd like to make a motion to approve those minutes as presented. Is there a second? Second. Second from Mr. Daly. Okay. Can we roll call, please?
Mrs. Maiorino. Yes. Mr. Craddy.
Yes.
Mr. Troy.
Yes.
Mr. Daly.
Yes.
Mr. Garen.
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano.
Yes.
Mr. Gentry.
Yes. Okay. Motion passes. Item 5 is our results of the canvass from the April 26, 2023 consolidated election. The results were provided from the McHenry County Clerk and King County Clerk. So I'd like to seek a motion to approve the canvass as presented. Is there a second? Second. Second from Mr. Craddy. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gentry.
Yes.
Mr. Garen.
Yes.
Mr. Troy.
Abstain.
Mr. Quagliano.
Yes.
Mr. Daly.
Yes.
Mrs. Maiorino. Yes. Mr. Craddy.
Yes. Okay, that motion passes. We're on to item 6. Let's have the our 4 newly elected members, if they could all come up to the podium, please. Somebody turn on the green. Okay, so we're going to have you do it as a group. So I'm sure you've got your singing voices together for tonight's thing. So whenever you're all ready, please start with your oath of office.
I, Gina
Gallagher,
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education of Huntley Community School District 158 in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Illinois, and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability. I further swear that I shall respect taxpayer interests by serving as the faithful protector of the school district's assets. I shall encourage and respect the free expression of opinion by my fellow board members and others who seek a hearing before the board while respecting the privacy of students and employees. I shall recognize that a board member has no legal authority as an individual, that decisions can be made only by a majority vote at a public board meeting. I shall abide by majority decisions of the board while retaining the right to seek changes in such decisions through ethical and constructive channels. As part of the Board of Education,
I shall accept the responsibility for my role in the equitable and quality education of every student in the school district.
I shall foster with the board extensive participation of the community, formulate goals, define outcomes, and set the course for Huntley Community School District 158. I shall assist in establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. I shall strive to ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children in compliance with state law. I shall serve as education's key advocate on behalf of students and our community school to advance the vision for Huntley Community School District 158. And I shall strive to work together with the district superintendent to lead the school district toward fulfilling the vision the board has created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills, knowledge, citizenship, and personal development.
Excellent. Congratulations to the board. If you can give us 1 second, we'll sign off here in a second. Give us a second to allow you to take your seat. So before we sign off, I just want to thank the existing 4 board members who are leaving for their dedication and service to our school district. Each of you has gone above and beyond for your community. Your efforts are greatly appreciated by all. We did our, farewell speeches last meeting, so I'll just keep it short and say a heartfelt thank you. You're all great people, and I appreciate the time and effort that's been put forth on behalf of the district. So thank you all very much. With that, then I'll make a motion to adjourn this board. Not a Latin guy, so Sindai, whatever you want to say. Make that motion. Is there a second? Second. Second from Mr. Daly. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. The board is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Bill, thank you. Thank you very much. Can't hold you. How are you? Okay, Kevin. Four of you up. If you guys draw straws for your chairs. Let me do the other part first. Yeah, we'll ultimately rearrange by next Thursday accordingly.
Hello.
Take a second, get comfortable. Crack your bottle of water. You got one? Yeah. So you can. Okay. All right. So we're gonna call to order our new board. So I want to resume this meeting with a call to order. If we can have roll call, Julie.
Mr. Craddy?
Here.
Mr. Bittman,
Here.
Mr. Troy,
Here.
Mr. Quagliano,
Here.
Mrs. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Thompson,
Here.
Mrs. Gallagher.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. And therefore, our first item of business is our election of officers. So the first officer election will be for president of the board. That position is, will usually go for the 2 years until the next election occurs. So at this time, there's no questions regarding that. We would take nominations for president.
I nominate Andy Bittman.
Okay. And I think the agenda states we needed, that seconds are needed, they are not for officers. We do not need seconds, so that's nomination one.
Yep. I would nominate Tony Quagliano.
Are there any further nominations?
I nominate Andy Bittman.
I nominate Andy Bittman.
Make it four. Oh, you can nominate yourself.
I nominate Andy Bittman.
All right. Okay, we have 4 nominations. Anybody else, Paul, you want to name? You don't need to name, no further there. All right, so, to have a brief discussion on it. I mean, we have 4 people who are nominating Andy. You're obviously good in nominating yourself, so you're okay with accepting that nomination.
I was strong-armed into it, but yeah.
Okay, that's okay. That's fine. No issues there. I mean, I was going to possibly offer an slight alternative to this. Again, if you feel you're comfortable day one starting out as president, no issues. But I would offer, in regards to my nomination, that I would be willing to serve for the next 8 months till the end of the calendar year as president, to allow for any transition that anybody wants, and then would gladly move out of that position at year end. So if that is of any bearing on anybody, that's fine, but that's a caveat that I can offer if taking over the meetings and that responsibility immediately is you're looking for any kind of transition or help on that. So just an option, so you can think about that. So we have 2 people nominated, myself and Andy. I think we should have a roll call.
Mr. Troy,
Mr. Quagliano.
Mrs. Murray,
Andy Bittman.
Mr. Thompson,
Andy Bittman.
Mr. Quagliano,
Tony Quagliano.
Mrs. Gallagher,
Andy Bittman.
Mr. Bittman,
Andy Bittman.
Mr. Craddy.
Tony Quagliano.
Okay. Mr. Bittman is elected president. At this point, you get to take over the meeting, sir.
All right. So the next point of business would be to nominate people for the vice president. And I guess just some comments before we start on that. I appreciate your offer to extend for 8 months. I would like your mentorship so that we can keep the meetings running smoothly, because I haven't done this before and there's going to be some choppiness here. But if there are any nominations for vice president.
Nominate Laura Murray.
Any other nominations? I would nominate Tony Quagliano.
I nominate Laura Murray. I nominate myself, Laura Murray.
I'll nominate Mr. Troy.
I nominate Laura Murray. unless Mr. Troy.
No.
So with that, I believe, any comments from anybody about the discussion before we have a vote? All right, let's have a vote for the nomination of Vice President.
Mrs. Gallagher? Laura Murray? Mr. Craddy?
Tony Quagliano.
Mr. Troy?
Tony Quagliano.
Mrs. Murray? Laura Murray. Mr. Bittman?
Laura Murray.
Mr. Quagliano?
Paul Troy.
Mr. Thompson?
Laura Murray.
All right, so with that, Laura Murray will be the Vice President. Congratulations, Laura. The next item of business will be to nominate for secretary. So are there any nominations for secretary?
Nominate Gina Gallagher.
I'll nominate Mr. Troy again.
I nominate Gina Gallagher.
I nominate Gina Gallagher.
Any other nominations? All right, any discussion around the secretary side of things from anyone? All right, so let's do a vote for the secretary.
Mr. Thompson?
Gina Gallagher.
Mr. Bittman?
Gina Gallagher.
Mr. Troy?
Vote for myself, please.
Mr. Quagliano?
Oh, Mr. Gagliano. Don't worry about it. Mr. Troy.
Mrs. Murray? Gina Gallagher. Mrs. Gallagher? Mrs. Gallagher. Mr. Craddy?
Mr. Troy.
With that, we have our new secretary, Gina Gallagher. Congratulations. There. So moving on to number 10, to establish the regular meetings. There was a schedule attached here, but it looks very similar to what we've done in the past. Is there any discussion around the meeting schedule?
If I could, just to point out, there's a couple of asterisks that exist in the schedule, and that's to allow workarounds for some of the standing state and national conferences that a number of us participate in. So that way we don't have a change in the schedule throughout the year, just a point of clarification.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion? All right, let's do a vote on that.
Mr. Craddy?
Yes.
Mr. Bittman?
Yes.
Mr. Troy?
Yes.
Mr. Quagliano?
Yes.
Mrs. Murray?
Yes.
Mrs. Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes. Point of order, there was no, I don't believe there
There
was
was
a second.
There's no second.
Nor was there a
It's
motion.
okay, it's okay. I mean, just show me as seconding the motion. Yeah. You didn't hear me.
That would be part of the choppiness of me stepping into this.
It's okay. I do it plenty of times.
All right, so I think we've, any other questions? So that's passed.
Yes.
All right, so the next thing here is item number 11, which is the mandatory board training. I think this is just informal. Just to inform, I think we are all aware as new members of the training that's required and the timing around that, that we need to take this. I think we have been set up in IASB already. Handle that. Is there any questions around that or any comments?
The only comment I would add in support, if you need anything in the process, Mrs. Stock and I are here to assist in that. She's your best point of contact out of the gate because she arranged for it, but we're happy to support if you have any technical or issues with the training.
Thanks.
All right, so we'll move on to the committee structure. This is something that we will talk through. That there are 7 committees at this time, and we've all expressed our interest. There's some things that we probably need to work out for chairmanships. The first thing I want to bring up for a discussion, though, is there has been some discussion with the community about changing one of the committees here and combining 2 of them. So I think, Gina, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. There's been discussion about combining legislation and policy and adding a special education committee. Now, we know that special education comes under curriculum. However, there's been a lot of discussion within the community about really putting forth a good effort on bringing to light some things that are going in that committee or in that area. And so we kind of feel like maybe we need to kind of have a special committee that would really look at that to help support that avenue. It's just a discussion that we've had. We've talked with Dr. Rowe about that. It's just something to talk about.
Some of you might have heard that for the first time. Any discussion points or concerns about doing that? I mean, I think I'm in favor of it because we need to put some focus on the special education side of things. So I think carving it out of curriculum makes a lot of sense to make sure that those kids always get time in these meetings, and we can always promote what's going on there, what's good and what's working and what may need improvement. So I think it's important. I think there's roughly 15% of the kids in our district have special needs. So I think this is the kind of thing that we need to do to highlight that, but open for other discussions.
I'll make the same point that I did with Mrs. Gallagher via email, is that I think that is accomplished within the curriculum committee on the board. Board committees are set up to push business through, and agenda items are able to come through to cover special education under the curriculum umbrella. I think you can accomplish some of the conversation through existing committees that are already in operation. But that said, it's at the board's discretion. Just my advice.
So, I mean, that's obviously not against it. How do you see that? Give a brief overview. I mean, how do you see that functioning? Committee of the whole all the time. I mean, are you looking for like spotlighted items every month that are presented from administration, and that's why you think there's multiple things that need to be addressed, or are you expecting it to be like a one item, every committee meeting? So I'm trying to envision what, at a committee of the whole, what that committee is going to be dealing with on a monthly basis. It needing that level.
Gina, do you want to take that?
Sure. My vision would be to make more of a working committee, a working board, where the person who would chair that would be more closely in contact with the Director of Special Services and, like you said, Mr. Quagliano, highlighting different celebrations and also different areas of need at the committee of the whole to be brought back to the regular board meetings.
Right. Administration from that side of the table, do you guys have any thoughts on that at all? As far as it being specifically in the curriculum committee and having its own committee? I mean, I know we have a new director coming forth. It's July 1, right? Yeah. So, I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think there is overlap, but I think we just need to be careful in making sure that we keep our conversations connected and not isolated, or we're not isolating, special services from learning innovation and curriculum that is connected. But there is overlap, between the two.
Well, I guess that's where, because special ed touches a lot of things. I mean, it touches transportation, it touches finances. I mean, there's a lot of elements to special ed. It's its own, definitely its own, your item. I mean, so I get focus that you're looking for to have on it. I'm sure that everybody, administration-wise, who's presenting on those topics feels comfortable with that type of separate committee at the board level.
I think that there's definitely certain things, depending on where it comes up, if we're talking about data, it makes sense for that to be in curriculum, because they are taking the state testing and all of those kinds of things that are maybe a small pocket that might not be, and so that would continue to dovetail. I think so that there may be something, and that's working with the administrator that month, maybe there's not a topic that would come up, so it wouldn't necessarily just be have something to have it. It might be talking about, so we've had a lot of discussion about the light program, maybe that would focus more there than O&M or somewhere else where it might be. So I think with good communication and collaboration between the departments, it could be something that would be able to be worked, through there, as long as we are looking at it as that whole, when we're talking about the students and their achievement and their goals and things like that, that really does go with the data and curriculum. And so it would, again, just be that good conversation between whoever's that chair and the learning and innovation area.
Thank you. Any other discussion points? Any discussion around the two that we proposed putting together, which I believe were legal and policy, as being kind of probably smaller topics sometimes, but combining them, so then we wouldn't have 8. There's a goodness to the 7 committees.
Right. No, I agree. I don't think there's a huge impediment to combining those. I think if we're going to do that, those two make the most sense.
And because I think not everybody was aware of this, I don't know if it's possible. I know the agenda was put out for the meeting on Thursday, but maybe we could wait and have a vote on the agenda on there so everybody could have some time to think about it. Because we're not trying to throw this at everybody. We want good discussion on this. We want to make sure we're making the right decision. Again, I think from my perspective, we've got a lot of items that are brought up around special education. It's important to make sure it's highlighted and that it's always at the forefront of what we're thinking.
As for the posted agenda on Thursday, I don't think it would procedurally interfere with anything in terms of what has to occur. There's not really a place for it to be discussed, as is already posted on the agenda. But we can probably cover it in the new business section just as a conversation. Since there's no action, we still add an agenda item as long as we do it.
Yeah, there would be an action, though, to create the committee, right?
There would be action,
to
right?
define. So
it's not a special meeting, so action can't be taken at the committee of the whole. The action wouldn't be able to be taken until the 18th, that regular meeting. So it could be a standalone action item at that meeting. And since there's no special education item or policy legislative on the committee of the whole, it wouldn't interfere procedurally. So it will be on the 18th as an action item.
Any concerns about that by waiting until the 18th to make that move? No. It gives people time to think about this and make sure we're doing the right thing. Again, I think from the administration we've talked to and the community, I think it's a good thing to do. For right now, we can always revisit it at another time. All right, with that, we will, so this was subject to the members are asked to submit 3 committee preferences to the president prior to the next regular meeting. So I think that has already been provided to me. If I'm reading that correctly, we wouldn't have this until the next regular meeting, which will also be the 18th. Is that correct? Am I reading the agenda correctly?
You are reading it correctly. However, our intent was to take action on it here tonight. But given that, to do things appropriately, action on the 18th would be probably prudent.
There's a couple here that
I think I would recommend discussion and kind of line it up and then take formal action on the 18th.
Right.
The trouble is going to be we're going to have to operate the meeting on Thursday night under the guise of a new chair.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, with that, go ahead.
Yes, I would go ahead and line up as best we can, the committees, based on the, you know, the format you're thinking of. And special ed, and again, I know we didn't have that thrown out as a choice, but we can actually do that right now. Do that, and, I mean, act that way and formally vote on it later. I don't even know that the committee structures technically have. New committee would, but as far as who's on committees and stuff like that, I don't know. We have formal votes on any of that.
Probably not. I think actually, the board president gets to dictate who's on what.
Yeah, exactly.
It's totally, it's your call. It's been a conversation of,
Right.
you know, that's why we operate the way we did, of list the committees in order in which you have preference, and if there's a committee you'd like to chair, and that kind of guided the spreadsheet, but it's your call.
Okay. Yeah. So if I'm looking at the sheet, and everybody doesn't have this, but this was submitted to us and we put it together. So for building and grounds, I think we have Paul Troy being recommended as the chairman, Tony Quagliano and Mike Thompson on that committee. And I think Paul Troy has been the chair for that committee for quite some time. I think that makes sense. Is there any discussion around that? Any reason to change that? Anybody?
No, I'm highly confident in Mr. Troy's abilities and what he's done, so I would strongly recommend we would stay with that. He's knowledge-wise tied into a lot of different projects that have been going on in the district, so I would just reaffirm that we would stick with that.
And Mr. Troy, on the spreadsheet that we all received, you were, I think, also on the legislative. Is this the one you'd want to chair?
Chair? No,
For the building and
chair of
grounds.
buildings.
Yeah.
For the building and
Chair
grounds.
of building and grounds?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to maintain that place.
Okay, so I think we'll set that as building and grounds. Paul Troy as the chairman, Tony Quagliano and Mike Thompson on the facility there. So I'm going to jump to HR because I think that's pretty well set as well. So what has been proposed here is Sean Craddy as the chairman, myself on the committee, and Tony Quagliano. Any issues or discussion that we want to have about that? And Sean, are you okay being the chair?
Yes.
Any discussion from anybody? So we'll consider that one good, and I'm going to jump to the other one that's nicely highlighted in yellow. Community engagement. So we have Laura Murray being proposed as a chair, Mike Thompson on that, and Gina Gallagher. Any?
If I could offer just some clarification on this. What was left to be completed tonight in discussion was Mrs. Gallagher's placement. And so prior to the Special Education Committee starting, you'll notice that Gina's actually looked in 4 different committees because she expressed interest in chairing the Special Ed Committee if it became a committee. So that's a conversation point. What I did was I filled her name into the 2 open spots. Based on our last email, where curriculum was what I was under the impression that we were going to stay at. So if we're going to go to special ed, we need to pay attention to that. And then the other point that I would make was Mike Thompson was the only person that expressed interest in chairing the curriculum committee. And I didn't highlight it initially because when special education didn't exist, Gina expressed interest in that committee as well if special education didn't become a thing.
Okay.
So if special education is going to be a committee, that's her point of interest, and she should chair it based on her background.
Right.
So that would leave Mike as the logical curriculum person based on his interest, and being the only person that is interested in chairing that committee.
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you for that. That's very helpful. All right, so Gina, because you were on here 4 times with the special ed, which one don't you want? The curriculum, legislative?
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if I just removed everyone from the legislative
Yeah.
and left policy and legislative combined, it eliminates the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But we need to have a chair, someone.
Correct.
Not going to be a chair then,
Correct.
because,
Laura is, she won't be she probably wants to be the community engagement chair, so she would just come off the chair of policy and somebody else would have to chair that.
all right, so community engagement, we're going to set as Laura Murray as the chairman, Mike Thompson, and Gina Gallagher on that setup, because she will be removed from legislative. So
Right.
good. So policy and legislative, we have,
This is gonna need some work.
maybe we should.
Yeah, I would back into that, yeah, I would try and fill out your special ed. Sharing it, who else is gonna be on that?
Right. Well, I'll jump to curriculum because I think we can set that based on Dr. Rowe's
Right.
comment. So curriculum, proposed is Mike Thompson as the chairman, Gina Gallagher and Laura Murray on that. Any discussion about that? If there's no discussion, then we'll set it up. Mike, you are going to be the chairman of the curriculum committee, and Gina and Laura will be on there. Now we'll get into the finance one, which is the three people being proposed are Tony Quagliano, myself, and Sean Craddy. I don't think there's any discussion about the three of us being on the committee.
Right.
I think there is some questions about the chairman. So maybe, Tony, could you enlighten, what do you see the role as the chairman?
The role has been the one I've dealt with for 16 years. You're working with Mark Altmeyer predominantly, but my role has been knowing all of the district's finances, from how the revenue sources come in, how they interact, our budgeting, all of the various line items that affect our budget. And it's, from my standpoint, it's been a focus of how do you stay in balance, how do you operate as one of the lowest cost per pupil school districts in the state. For the last 2 years, I've chaired that committee. It's been somebody who knows every element of our financial piece, who understands the 100-plus page CAFR report, the audited financial statements, the various reporting requirements that go into reimbursements, state. Having that guidance, all the bonding elements that we've done, knowing basically our entire financial position and how it reflects to our educational environment. So I don't feel like I have to be the chairman, because at some point I've got to come off at some point here, and I've only got 2 years left, and somebody else does need to do it. But it's probably not a bad idea, again, offer from a transition standpoint. These chairs don't have to stay on the full 2 years. Like I said, I do understand my role here over the next 2 years is to kind of try and mentor and pass on knowledge, and so I'm more than willing to do that. So I don't, I would, again, it's my comfort zone. That's why I choose it. From that standpoint, is to chair it. It's not the end all be all, but I do think having knowledgeable on it and the most well-rounded knowledge-wise to initially start out as its chair.
And I, in general, agree that you have, obviously, a lot of knowledge on it. My concern is, in the last meeting, Mr. Altmeyer's budget was presented as if there was only one option, which was to raise to the max levy foreseeable future, and he actually outlined basically a little bit of, I'll be honest here, a little fear-mongering for any sort of touching the budget. And that's my concern of why I want to be the chairman, is because not understanding necessarily all the details and ins and outs of this, if we have a CFO that only sees one option, which is to raise taxes, that's not what the community wants. And that's my concern.
Right, and I'm not opposed to looking at different options. This first go around, I didn't give him a thorough going through, because I wanted to, it was its first draft, and we go through several drafts of this. I don't disagree that you should see what that does and how it impacts it, because I think that's where some people who haven't worked with the school finances might not understand the compounding element that occurs with the revenues and what your resources are available each year as a snapshot. It becomes a starting point, especially for property taxes, with the following year. So I don't disagree with you that you need to take a look at it so you understand as an alternative, is this really a viable alternative to do something like that? Or are you starting to put yourself in a trick bag of here, I didn't go after I didn't go after the, tax increase that was available for the year because it's dictated by CPI. If I don't do that, how does that affect every year going forward? Because it does. And it, you should probably, we should probably have him go through that exercise to see how that affects it, because I don't know that everybody is knowledgeable on what that looks like. So I agree. I'm never opposed to anything, any options, because we should talk through all of those options and what they mean. But again, a little bit of it is, I know, sometimes I know too much, and it's too much instinctual for myself, and maybe I'm not sharing that with the rest of the class as to what it might mean to the district, as far as how you move forward. And again, that stuff, there's a huge balancing act that goes on with all of that budgeting and all of looking at how you're going to move your levy forward. I mean, like I said, the options we've looked at to mitigate any of those tax increases has been obviously recently with our bond side of it, because you can control our levy and what our taxpayers pay by adjusting what we're going to require the community to pay from a debt repayment standpoint and not affect the ongoing levy. So those are all items that we can probably need to go through and discuss, and people need to see and understand what they are. And from my end of it, like I said, I'm not adverse to looking at any of it. I mean, I'm not a fear monger. Mr. Altmeyer does sometimes portray a certain desperation of funds needed, but it's fine. That's where we as a board have to figure out how that is, what that really is. So.
And to that end, I'm also a licensed school business official like Mr. Altmeyer is. And having gone through that master's program, it is a complex beast to go through. There's a lot of detail that goes into it. It's not like a corporate budget where you just sell more widgets or find more revenues or just lay people off. This is a far different business and a far different animal than what typically comes to mind in fixing corporate budgets. So I think it is very important to understand the entanglements of that beast and how that works into property taxes and all the things that go into a school district. So to make change for the sake of change is not a good thing without understanding the deeper impacts that compound year after year, and how that affects the school district. Many years ago, at the outset of the millennium, 23 years ago, maybe even before that, the school district was doing tax anticipation warrants, which, if you're not familiar with those, that's essentially you're borrowing money from today or tomorrow in order to pay today's bills. That may work for some people at home, but in an environment like public school finance, that's a very slippery slope, because if you can't afford it this year and you can't afford it next year, you continue to build on those tax anticipation warrants until you essentially drown yourself. So it's incumbent on everybody, to whoever's part of this, to understand all of the machinations of how all that is pieced together.
Yeah, I won't say I completely appreciate the complexity of the school board budget, but I have looked at a fair amount of that. So I appreciate the comments from everyone. In one way, it's actually a lot easier than a business budget, because I can't, at my business, I can't just push a button and get 5% more revenue. That's something that this district can do with a simple vote up here of 4-3. You can just vote and just get 5% more revenue. So that's a lot simpler than what I have to do. We have salespeople, marketing people to go generate more revenue, and there's market forces that affect that. And that's something that I think we need to be careful with.
But you also have no limitations on what revenue growth you can generate, where you do here. There are limitations to what revenue growth in a business. You potentially can grow your revenue based on your merits of your business. That's not the case here. But I appreciate what you're saying.
this is gonna be the discussion that we're gonna have on this board.
Yeah,
So-
and again, not to drag it out, I'm perfectly fine with whatever you decide. Like I said, I'm perfectly fine if I'm only chair for 8-9 months and we switch over and you're comfortable with that, that's fine. Whatever you decide, I'm fine with. I will, go along with whatever, but, like I said, I just know from my, experience, that I have the knowledge as to what is involved in all of this, so.
Yeah, and I think that's something, I'll need to think on it, and then maybe we'll talk.
Yeah, that's
a
fine.
little
And
bit about
like I
it.
said, I'm fine with it.
On that. So special ed, we have Gina on it, and I'm trying to figure out who is missing. Who only has
I'd like
two?
to have Laura on there if she's not on 3.
Now we're drafting.
Yeah, right.
Apparently it's on 3.
I put myself on the curriculum in the meantime.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, so it should be Freddie, Sean, and, so the choices are Troy. Sean Craddy, do you have any interest in being on the special ed committee?
Yep, I can be on that one. If somebody else wants it, I don't want to take it away. I'm happy to move wherever.
And, I guess it would be between Laura, if you want to be on policy, or on the special ed, or Paul Troy, as we're combining policy and legislation, if you have a desire one way or the other.
I'm flexible. It's not necessarily the best use of my skill set, but if that's where I'm needed, that's where I'm needed.
Or would you rather be on the special ed?
Yeah.
Okay. So then we'll make the special ed committee chaired by Gina Gallagher, with Sean Craddy and Laura Murray. And I believe that means the policy and legislative will be Paul Troy, myself. There's got to be a missing one. Maybe probably Mike Thompson. I think
you're right.
No, Mike's
No, he's on the ground.
curriculum.
Is it Gallagher? Might be.
I can't be on there twice. Right now, I only have 2 assignments.
Right, no, you're fine, it's the others.
Oh, that's
it. Now, policy legislative is 1.
yeah.
Building and grounds is number 2, and I can't be on a committee twice.
Someone's on that board.
She took her off.
I did already. I took you off the policy bar. Did not look at.
All right, well, I'll look at this and we can
Combine.
finalize it on
Whoever is
Thursday.
taking it
It should.
is who, it's gotta be either you or Mr. Quagliano will have to chair.
Okay.
Because whoever is not the finance chair is this person standing out needing to chair a committee.
Okay, so we'll make that decision over the next 2 days, but then the policy committee, without necessarily knowing who the chair would be, myself, Paul Troy, and Tony Quagliano. And that'd be the policy and legislative. So I think we just need to decide, between Tony and myself on finance and the policy and legislative. I just like to think about that because I do respect, Tony's, experience on the finance side, and, we've had a lot of meetings together, and I've always liked the discussions that we've had. They've been open, as he has described.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, we will present the final one on Thursday, but really that's the decision that we'll make.
And when you're weighing that, if you're interested in a conversation on what policy legislative has been and what it could be, because I think there's opportunity for more involvement at the state policy level with our legislators, we can certainly have that discussion offline.
Any other discussion points for the committees? Otherwise, I will move to adjourn.
Second?
All right, so we will motion to adjourn, seconded by Gina. So we can do a voice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. All right, the ayes have it.
Meeting